Hello everyone, I was going to show you how to make 4 loaves of bread in 1 hour. This is a recipe I've used for many years that I've shared with some of my friends and family, and now I want to pass it on to everyone else so that they can also make delicious bread. These are the ingredients that will go into this bread recipe. We have 10.5 cups of bread flour. I use unbleached. You can get that at any store. Half a cup of sugar. I put in half a cup of potato flakes, but that's optional. You don't have to use those. A tablespoon of salt and 3 heaping tablespoons of instant yeast. And then we're going to use this soy lecithin, and that is going to be 3 big dropperfuls about the size of a $1/2. We're going to mix all of the dry ingredients first, and then we're going to add the lecithin and 4 cups of hot water. I'm also going to make this recipe by hand, just in case you don't have a bread mixer. But you can do this with a bread mixer pretty easy. That's how I traditionally make this bread. You can also half this recipe, so everything would go in half to make just 2 loaves of bread. Okay, so here we're going to mix our dry ingredients in a bowl. 10.5 cups of flour, bread flour. We've got half a cup of sugar, half a cup of dried potato flakes, a tablespoon of salt, and 3 heaping tablespoons of instant yeast. And we're going to mix all of this together until it's all incorporated. Once you've stirred all of the dry ingredients together, we're going to put the 3 glops of soy lecithin, so about the size of a $1/2. It's okay to be liberal with this. It gives its elasticity. It helps with preservation. We don't use oil in this recipe. And moisture. 4 cups of hot water, so as hot as your tap will go. You're going to pour that straight in. And now the fun part of mixing all of this. In the mixer, you would mix this until it's all incorporated, and then continue mixing for another 5 minutes. After 1 minute, you may want to add a couple more tablespoons of water based on your altitude, based on the humidity outside. You'll be able to tell. The consistency you want at the end is going to be a bit like Play-Doh, quite stretchy, not as dry though. It'll be really nice. So at first this is going to be really sticky, and that's okay. As you continue to knead, it will form into a nice elastic ball. Don't be afraid to get your hands in there. Of course, after you've washed them, which I did. I'm going to add a little bit more water. Just a tablespoon at a time. This will be a good workout for your forearms. All right, I'm gonna go in with my hands and pour a little bit more water in. If you watch the clock, you'll be doing this for about 5 minutes. Just a little bit more water, just so it can grab all of that dry flour that's on the bottom of the bowl. And if it's sticky, then that's good. It will start off sticky. You don't want it too dry. All right, how's yours looking? Is it getting a little less sticky? It may take a couple more minutes. You'll be able to tell if you're doing it by hand here. Maybe you need to scrape some of the excess off of your hand, like so. So you can continue working the dough. Of course, using a bread mixer like a KitchenAid or a Bosch, or even a hand mixer with bread dough hooks works well. We're very fortunate for modern technology. Almost there. This is a good way to get out your anger and aggression if you've got cabin fever. You just need some dough. Okay, by now most of your dough should be intact, pulling away from the bowl quite easily and not so sticky. You see that texture? It's a little sticky, but that's okay. Now I'm gonna wash my hands. Okay, once you have mixed your dough, I'm going to take some non-stick spray, spray it on a cleaned counter. You can be generous. This is going to keep it from sticking. We don't want to add extra flour, as that will make it tougher and drier. And then we're just gonna stick that out there and give it, you could even put your hands on there so that they're not sticking to the dough. Just give it some last little kneading and flip it upside down for a nice round ball. Now you could take a knife. Sometimes I'll cut with my pastry cutter. And remember, I made 4 loaves, so we're gonna cut 4 pieces as equal as you can. It may help to spray the knife so it doesn't stick. In this case, it's fine. For me, it's not sticking. Okay, so we've got 4 separate loaves to work with. With these loaves, I'm gonna make 1 plain loaf, 1 cinnamon loaf, and 2 rolls, 2 servings of rolls. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside for a minute. And with your loaf of bread, you're going to shape this just like you're playing with Play-Doh. And as you tuck in the edges, you're going to pinch to kind of hold it. So you're going to come from the outside and stretch in, and you're going to pinch. Depending on how long your dough sat, you might get a couple bubbles. That's okay. You can just work with that. All right. So you're going to want to take your bread pan, spray that, and put your loaf, which is nice and smooth, on the top. And then you'll end up covering it with a dish towel and to let it rise for 20 minutes. Okay. Just set that aside. Now we're going to make the cinnamon loaf. By rolling out first, spray the rolling pin so it doesn't stick. I'm just going to make a nice little rectangle. It likes to shrink up on you. Okay, so now we're going to brush softened butter, not melted, all over this. We're going to sprinkle generously brown sugar and powdered cinnamon. Okay, so now that you've softened your butter, we're going to take and generously apply with some sort of brush. I think this is probably an actual paintbrush, but I like it. It works well. Just spread that all over the dough. You can decide how little or how much you want to put on. Looks like I'm probably using about 3/4 of a stick. And don't go too close to the edges because you don't want them greasy. You're going to seal and pinch those, remember to seal it, so stay away from those edges. Okay, and next, cinnamon. Just sprinkle. Again, it's up to you how much or how little you want. Just get some nice and covered. And then finally, brown sugar. Probably put about a cup of sugar in here, and you're just going to sprinkle all over the dough. And if you want to put the brown sugar on first and then the cinnamon, that's fine. It's going to taste the same. So, depending on if you're making a loaf of cinnamon bread or cinnamon rolls would be the direction that you're going to roll this. If I were making cinnamon rolls, I would probably roll it this way, making it longer, and I'll cut them using floss, and then you can put them in a casserole dish or on a cookie sheet. But being that this is going to be a cinnamon loaf, it's going to be a loaf, so I'm going to roll it this way. And you just start on one edge, and as you roll it, kind of tuck, make it tight, because you don't want loose air bubbles or loose bread inside, and just kind of stretch it a little bit and as you roll. And then you can just form to come up, and you're going to, remember, pinch and seal. So that stays together. And then you also want to pinch up the side. So take the bottom and pull up and pinch. And do the same thing with the other side. Pull up and pinch. Gonna take your other pan, give it a little spray, and you can actually, you know, form this to your bread pan. Now, if you choose to, you can base this with butter or even spray it with nonstick spray and sprinkle it with a little more brown sugar just to give it a nice little crust. I like to use cinnamon sugar, and I'll just sprinkle a little bit on top. And I'm just gonna let this rise for 25 minutes. Okay, so next are rolls, and before we go on, I just wanted to say, if you're making a mixture of things like the bread and the cinnamon bread and the rolls, you want to leave the cinnamon bread for the last, because otherwise it's leaving brown sugar and cinnamon all over the counter, and then your rolls are going to taste like that. So I had to clean and then respray. All right, so this loaf can make as little as 8 rolls if you want big giant rolls, or a dozen or even more. It's up to you how big you want them. Of course, you want to make sure that your counter is sprayed, and you can cut this with a knife or pastry cutter, something that will just, and you want to spray that and just cut in how many pieces you feel like you want to make. I usually measure by just like how it fits in my hand. And I usually get about a dozen doing it that way. So it's not exact, but we'll see what we can come up with here. Okay. All right, and then there's several different ways you can do these. I'll show you a couple different ways that I do. You could just flatten it out just like when you made your loaf of bread, and you're going to bring up the sides and pinch, and that's going to make it nice and smooth on top. Okay, so you can do them all that way, and you can line up about 4 going this way and 6 that way to make 2 dozen. That's my goal. Or if you want, another way I usually do for holidays, make it a little fancier, is I will roll it out and just tie it in a knot. See? You can also do in muffin tins where they're clover shaped, and you would just put them in 3 separate balls, and then they would grow like that. So we're just going to finish making this loaf and then the other loaf. Okay, once you have formed all of the rolls, I did half and half, and you're gonna go ahead and cover them with a dish towel and let them rise for 25 minutes. Okay, after about 25 minutes, you should have risen bread, and you're going to put it in a preheated oven of 350 degrees for 25 minutes. What I like to do is halfway in between, I'll put a sheet of tin foil either loosely on top or on the rack above it so that it doesn't get too dark. And the cinnamon loaf, because there's butter and brown sugar, it's going to need a little extra time to cook because it's more soft, there's more moisture on the inside. So this is what it looks like after about 13 minutes. I'm going to just put a sheet of foil so that they don't get too dark. So another 12 minutes. Now we're going to check on our rolls, see if they've risen. We're going to put these also at 350, but for only about 15 minutes because they're smaller, so they don't need as much time. Okay, so after you've completed the 25 minutes on the loaf of bread, remember we're letting the cinnamon loaf stay in for about 10 minutes longer. Just set it on a cooling rack, and if you want to, you don't have to. You can use that softened butter that you had out before for the cinnamon loaf and brush the top of the bread. Now, it is recommended to let this completely cool before slicing it. However, we like to slice off the very heel fresh and put some butter on it. It's really delicious. So, an electric knife makes slicing a lot smoother. So I'm just going to butter on top. Yum, yum, yum. All right, once you've had your rolls in for around 15 minutes, it could vary based on each oven, but just keep an eye on them. You want to transfer them to a cooling rack so that they can cool as well. And then you can, if you choose, brush them on the tops with the butter. Okay, so once you've transferred them to the cooling rack, you just let them cool completely or serve them warm if you're waiting for them for dinner. And then, like I said, this is optional. You can brush them with melted butter or softened butter. As they're hot, they will melt the butter on contact. All right, so after you've taken out the cinnamon loaf, it might be sticky around the sides because of the brown sugar, so you want to just loosen that. And then also put that on the cooling rack. There's some caramelization on the bottom. Okay, so same thing, you want to let this cool, but we could do that first slice just so you can see what it looks like on the inside. Okay, this is great. I like to spread butter on it with some honey and sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon after it's toasted. It's super delicious. Once they've completely cooled and you want to slice the whole thing so that you have sliced bread, you could probably put it in a gallon Ziploc bag. I've gone to Smart and Final and gotten actual bread sacks. These are 15 inches long, and they come with bread ties as well. And so that's how I store mine. I'll store them in the freezer unsliced, and when I thaw, I'll slice it out. So that's it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the bread demonstration, and I look forward to hearing how your bread turned out too. I'll leave a link at the end if you want to find the soy lecithin that I use. Otherwise, happy baking!